President Putin's today announced that he's cancelling his forthcoming trip next week to France in a developing spat between the two countries. This is what the Russian president's press secretary said a bit earlier about it.
Vladimir Putin indicated from the very beginning that he's going to meet his French counterpart only when François Hollande is comfortable to do so. So we'll wait until this moment arrives, and the Russian president will once again decide whether to visit France if it's on the agenda.
All right, RT's Daniel Hawkins down there close by the Kremlin. Take us through how this is all kicked off this morning. How's this rift developed?
Well, rising tensions, Kevin, between France and Russia over Syria, on the back of rising tensions also with Russia and Washington. But that's a slightly different story. Putin was due to visit Paris on an official visit. He was due to open a Russian cultural centre exhibition, visit an Orthodox church, and also hold those all-important bilateral talks with President Hollande on the Syria resolution. This was going to be quite a big grand visit, but the French diplomatic mission then informed the Russian counterparts that they wanted this visit to be downgraded. They wanted to keep it strictly to a working meeting on Syria with Hollande and Putin. Understandably, the Russians weren't too pleased about that, and as we heard there earlier, they decided to postpone the visit until the French president was comfortable meeting Putin personally and for that visit to take place. Now, the French government has recently been disappointed, to put it mildly, that Russia vetoed their no-fly zone proposal in the UN Security Council, the no-fly zone over Aleppo. Hollande actually went one step further, accusing Russia and Damascus of war crimes in the country, even threatening them with the International Criminal Court, although how that proposal would work out isn't quite it's hard to understand, I should say, because the court has no jurisdiction over Syria at this moment in time. The French president himself, though, has recently sent some pretty mixed signals. He initially said at first that a meeting wasn't necessary, then he was willing to meet with Putin. Let's hear it from the French president himself.
I asked myself the question, is this meeting useful? Is this necessary? Can it apply pressure? Can it ensure that it will stop what Putin is doing together with the Syrian regime, supporting its air force, which drops bombs on the people of Aleppo? I'm ready to meet with President Putin anytime if we have a chance to promote peace and install a truce.
Well, quite mixed messages, as you heard there, from Hollande, all coming within literally 24 hours of each other. So a bit of confusion there on a diplomatic level, as I'm sure you can understand. As I said before, this all began with firstly, the visit of the French foreign minister to Russia, where they came to some discussion, to some conclusions about this French Security Council proposal. That French proposal was then vetoed by Russia, and in turn, Russia's proposal to have these terrorist al-Nusra fighters escorted out of Aleppo was subsequently also vetoed by other Security Council members. So a bit of tit-for-tat diplomatic war going on there, perhaps. Now, relations do come in swings and roundabouts, as we saw, for example, in Russia-Turkey relations, which have seen a warming recently. So we're not ruling out some sort of last-minute schedule changes here. A visit could well go ahead maybe in the coming weeks, coming months, we just never know. But certainly in the short term, it looks like the relations have taken a nosedive, Kevin.
All right, well, we'll let you keep across any more that comes out from the Kremlin there, any more reaction to it, and from around the world as well. But for now, thank you very much, Dan. Martin McCall is joining us, Arthur and Russia analyst. Sir, thanks for coming on. As Daniel was just saying, our correspondent, mixed messages from France over the last 24 hours. First, President Hollande says he sees no point in meeting Putin. You know, it was going to be downgraded. Then, well, here he is, ready to meet him any time. Why the mixed messages?
Why the mixed messages? Because France is in a very difficult position because on the face of it, they would like an agreement with Russia in Syria because they're one of those countries which would like the sanctions imposed on Russia to be lightened, to be reduced, so that they can increase trade and so on. So it's difficult for France because France, if you like, has to go along with the United States in taking a hard line on Russia in Syria. And you can see from the Security Council votes that, as somebody said, tit for tat, if you veto my motion, then I will veto yours. And we're in a situation now where, if you like, you have to go back to the very beginning and try and find some common language. What can we do can we actually achieve anything here just by talking? Because from the point of view of the military situation in Syria, Russia is dominant. Russia dominates the air, it's close to President Assad and so on, and France is not going to intervene militarily. So therefore, the only thing that France can use are in fact words, along with the United States, try and get some agreement with Sergei Lavrov, talk to Lavrov, try and get some agreement on stopping the bombing in Aleppo or alleviating the human disaster in Aleppo.
Yeah. Just to remind our viewers really briefly, Martin, about the French resolution that was proposed to the UN Security Council that didn't go through. Russia also proposed one as well. But the French one was to impose a no-fly zone. Moscow's problem with that is it said it would therefore protect the terrorist group al-Nusra and that they'd regroup, etc., etc. So that was the practical reason why Russia said, no, this isn't going to work. Do you think this is fallout from the fact that Moscow specifically blocked that French resolution then?
No, it's not really that, because a no-fly zone, how would you impose a no-fly zone? It would, in fact, if you found a Russian warplane in the air, you'd have to shoot it down. Yeah. So therefore, you would require a large air force which was capable of shooting down Russian warplanes if they, in fact, did not agree with you. So therefore, talking about a no-fly zone is only diplomatic language. There's no way that France or the United States or Britain or any other country can enforce one. It has to be agreed by Moscow, and from France's point of view, they really have no diplomatic clout here. All they can do is to appeal to Moscow and say we should have no-fly zone because it's a humanitarian disaster. We have to resolve the problem in Aleppo, stop the fighting and so on, stop the killing and so on. This is the only way forward. That's the only thing that France can do, just use words. Because from a military point of view, from, if you like, a security point of view, they are very weak. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to involve themselves militarily in Syria, because a no-fly zone would mean that somebody, some air force, would have to come in and enforce it. Yeah. Because Russia will never agree to that, because as they say, you're protecting terrorist groups, and we don't want that. You will allow them to attack President Assad's troops. And so on, and we cannot agree to that.
Briefly, Martin, let's just spend 30 seconds talking about, reiterating what Dan was talking about there and picking up on what you talked about. You're saying that France is softer than a lot of Western countries on the ongoing restrictions on Russia at the moment. I'd like to see them loosened. Do you think this is going to blow over then? Do you think behind the scenes there is a lot of talking going on right now? Diplomatically, what's the deal here between Russia and France here? Any big problems, or is it going to blow over in 30 seconds?
I don't think it will become a major problem, because French diplomacy is very nuanced, and therefore they were looking for some type of settlement which will improve the humanitarian situation and also lead to a weakening of sanctions against Russia, because they're very keen on that. They want more trade with Russia. So therefore they don't want to blow up into a big problem, and will try and negotiate some kind of exit from it so that they can then get onto a more even keel and improve relations with Russia over Syria, and also possibly argue for a lessening of the sanctions.
Martin, it's always good to get your educated and measured take on these things. I want to come back to you, if I can beg a bit more of your time this lunchtime, come back to you in just a minute or two for a few more thoughts. If you stay with us, thank you.